Welcome to Tomorrow Makers, where we explore how we live, learn, work, and play now and in the future. I'm Carlos Ramos.
And I'm Summer Beatty. Today we have Dr. Naeem Jabour from Architecture and Sustainable Design and his student, Sandra Galick.
So much to learn today. So many quotable moments.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, my thoughts exactly. Yeah, and it goes beyond, we talked about architecture and sustainable design, of course, but it goes so far beyond that. I think a lot of what Naeem mentioned in here and what Sandra talked about, I think we can all resonate with.
Yeah, I think about my house and its architecture, and it's like, this thing's built in late 50s. So, I mean, it looks like, any other, ranch style home. It's really nondescript. So many things I want to do with it, like raise it and then, start from scratch. But like he gave me some ideas, just in talking, like, wait a minute, no, I don't have to go that far. There's just some minor things that I could do to, one, make it, more attractive, but also to make it more efficient, make it more sustainable, and maybe after a few years, put a little change back in my pocket.
Yes, that was really cool. The ROI factor definitely matters. All right, so let's get to it. Let's hear what they have to say.
All right. Tomorrow Makers.
Enjoy. Welcome. It's so great to have you both with us today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Who do we have today?
We have Dr. Naeem Jabour, Architecture and Sustainable Design Professor. Welcome.
Good to be here. Thank you.
Thanks for being with us. And we have Sandra Galick, student in that program.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Sandra.
Absolutely.
All right. So we'll get going. All right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Okay, so maybe we'll just start at the beginning. I'd love to know how you got into architecture. What is that story?
It's a very unconventional story. I started as a biology major, thinking I'm going to go to pre-med. That was the path that I always dreamt of and I planned. But then I started taking biochem classes and organic chemistry and all the biology that goes with it, and I was terrible. And I hated it. It just wasn't, there was no passion, there's no drive, and I couldn't see the light. So I took a semester off and I thought about what am I going to do with my life? And I always loved to just sit down and sketch and just take pictures of buildings and just go and explore neighborhoods. And just a couple of months of thinking and exploring, and the aha moment, architecture was the path for me. So that's how I started my journey.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah. I did not know that. Sandra,
Yep.
Did you know that?
I did not know that.
And everybody's really lucky that I did not go into the health field and medicine because I was really, really bad at it. So I gave everybody a big favor by doing that.
Now, was that something you wanted to go in the health profession or explore the health field on something you thought beforehand, or were there external pressures that were pushing you that way?
It's external cultural norms and expectations that you grew up in a Lebanese family, you're going to be either a doctor or an engineer. My dad was an engineer, so I just hated math. So I said, okay, maybe medicine is the path for me. 2 years into my college in Lebanon, I was like, this is not going to work. So I took the time off, and thank God I did.
Yeah. And thankfully for us as well.
Thankfully, we're very lucky to have you, Dr. Jabour.
Yeah. Likewise.
And what does your family think now of your career?
They're really proud and appreciative, and just seeing me fulfill my dreams, even though it took a very kind of winding, path. They're happy. They're happy that I'm happy.
And so I'm also curious then, how did you end up in Pennsylvania? You said you were from Lebanon.
Yeah. So my dad went to school in Mississippi.
Okay.
So we always had the U.S. connection, and it was always a dream of mine to come to the U.S. But we were in a time of war in Lebanon, and I wanted a way out, especially after I decided that medicine is not my path. So that semester I took off, I started researching and kind of brainstorming, where's my path, Europe, the U.S. My dad knew a professor in the U.S., and he had family in Altoona and in Jonestown, and he spent many of his spring breaks here in PA. So that's how the connection was made. I was able to get my paperwork in order and get my visa, and then before we know it, I was in the U.S.
Regarding sustainable design then, so how did your how did your interest direct towards the sustainability aspect, or does that just go hand in hand with architecture for you?
It didn't early on. In my schooling, it wasn't really a big focus. And then when I practiced in Houston for 8 years, it was peripheral on the side. And that was the main reason I actually decided to stop my professional practice and go into academia, is that I was seeing things done in a way that just doesn't make sense for us, for the planet. So I stopped working after 8 years, went back to grad school, focusing on sustainability. And that's how my path started with the whole sustainable design approach.
I have to ask, I stumbled upon your architectural website, and you have a tagline, design like you give a damn.
Yeah.
So curious, what inspired this? I think we have a little bit of a clue, but I would love to hear your take on it.
My approach with everything in life is like, if you're going to do something, just do it like you give a damn, or just don't do it. There's a really awesome book called Design Like You Give a Damn. It's by the Architecture for Humanity. So the problem is in the architecture field is that we do things just to do things, to get it done and to get a paycheck and move on, without the impacts on humanity, on humanism, on us, how we feel, experience, and what kind of footprint we leave behind us. So I tell my students, and the way I live my life, do it and give a damn about it. And I don't care what the result is, at least you put all yourself in it. And that's really where it comes from. Yeah, but it's intriguing when students hear me say that.
Okay, so they're hearing that in the classroom as
Absolutely.
well. Okay, good.
They hear it in class and they see it in the project briefs at the end. Just give a damn about what you're doing. Otherwise, you're in the wrong field.
Yeah, is that part of your rubric?
It is part of the rubric. The impact, the experience that you're going to create, is it really meaningful?
Right.
I'd love to see what the gradations are in that particular rubric criteria.
Most of them are shocked early on, but most of them, they do give a damn. And it's just finding a way to portray that and show that and not be afraid, to do it. It's not a big deal. It's just care. That's it. So...
And that's it for this week's Tomorrow Makers.
We've been shut down. We said a swear word. I don't think that counts.
No, that's
okay.
the message.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Anything you do.
I don't know. Can we drop these mics? I don't think we should.
Yeah, you just gotta. Fancy. It's gotta be more than what's just on the surface. We gotta put more into everything that we do, and that in architecture is so critical. Creating this experience, that meaningful opportunity for people to enjoy what we're doing with them. And that D word is really critical. Yeah.
It does punctuate it, doesn't it?
It does. Now, Sandra, you haven't had a specific course with Dr. Jabour yet, but I know you've participated in some of his lectures. How has that ethos been presented, and how have you incorporated that into the work you're doing as a student?
I have gotten really good advice from Professor Jabour. What I really like is that when we present him with a question, he'll come back with a question that reflects it back in a way and puts it in such a light that we never quite thought of it like that. And so it really... I can't find the word. It just encompasses. I mean, I know that last semester I was struggling really with connection space. And he said, well, I forget exactly how you put it, but, it made me look at my project differently. And I said, oh, why didn't I think of that? But he always presents it in such a way that, we get to reflect and then look at it in a different light. And really inspiring.
Yeah, I think it's really important to, when we're getting kind of asked questions, all faculty, we can definitely give answers and just, solve it for you. But my approach is that if I can throw it back at you to think a little bit more meaningful and deeper about the question, you're going to come up with an answer that you have a stake in and that is more, connected to your thought process versus me just giving you the answer. I will give you the answer eventually if need be, but I'd rather us kind of brainstorm and go a little bit deeper and kind of philosophically think about what am I asking here? Because the answer is there. I've just not seen it yet. And this kind of non-traditional way of seeing and solving problems that is sometimes a straight line gets you to where you need to go. Sometimes you have to really go on an unwinding journey to kind of find the solution that is fitting for you. So, I try my best to do that with all my students. I kind of have this thing known about me that when you ask Professor Jabour a question, he's going to ask you a question back. That's going to help you lead and get an answer, but it's never going to be, here's the answer.
I love that. It puts skin in the game.
Absolutely.
For the education. I mean, it's not just that you're showing up and
Right.
Being a receptacle for everything that's coming at you, because we're really terrible at taking a whole bunch of stuff and assimilating it without doing that process of bringing it back. And I love that you're doing that.
Yeah, it's a dialogue, and we need to be didactic in our thought process and not just question, answer, let's move on. No, it's a lot more than that.
I agree. It brings a nice element of dynamic.
Yeah. So be ready for next semester. It's going to be fun.
So excited.
Well, I'm starting to appreciate that the questions I've asked you, you haven't just asked me another question back. Not yet.
There's still time.
Oh, well, back to the sustainability topic. I'm just kind of curious, as you're designing homes as an architect or working on remodels or other projects, what are you considering with regard to the climate, the environment, and all those aspects that you talked about earlier?
Yeah, I mean, the client needs are really critical, and they determine what we can do and the scope of it. But I'm always trying to approach sustainability from a very manageable, approachable way, where it's not always about high tech and cutting edge technology. It's sometimes just going back to the days we built things decades or maybe centuries ago, where just use passive architecture, where we can use sunlight for heating and daylight, where we can use wind for ventilation and cooling, where we can use proper building materials to create a thermal mass like insulation. So it's not always about high tech and making sure that you have all the tech tools and technology. And sometimes we tend to do this a lot in this day and age. You just refer to engineering and technology as a solution, even though sometimes nature around us has all the solutions. If you plant a deciduous tree outside of your window, south facing, you're going to get automatic shading in the summertime with zero investment and a beautiful, aesthetically pleasing thing to look at. And in the winter time, it will shed the leaves and let the sun in to heat your house. So simple solutions as that doesn't really cost you much, that sometimes we overlook.
You had mentioned passive buildings. Can you explain what that is?
So passive buildings are structures that utilize natural systems to heat the building, to cool the building, to insulate the building. And it minimizes our reliance on active mechanical systems like your typical air conditioning and heating systems. These are buildings that are very well built. They're insulated, they're airtight, and they're passive, which means they're using natural systems versus expending energy. And they're awesome to operate, they're comfortable to live in, and they're very affordable and cheap in terms of utilities. And it's something the Vikings did. It's not a new thing that's doing. We just ignored it. We just ignored it for decades.
So I'm just thinking we're in Williamsport, PA. If you walk down the streets of, do you live in Williamsport?
I do.
Okay. Is that common practice here?
It's not common practice.
Okay.
It's starting to become more prevalent in the US. This whole movement really started very strongly in Germany with a passive house system. And then it started to make its way across because people recognize that we can build better, more affordable, and make it more equitable for everybody that can live in a more comfortable, sustainable way and not rely on, big engineering systems.
It's really surprising what you can take advantage of, despite the landscape that you're in. I'm thinking of several series that I've seen on the major streamers. I'm in the middle of one with on Apple Plus right now. I think it's called Home. we'll have to check that and put the link to it. But in one particular episode, they took a barn, which I think was a barn or some building that is of that size, just this massive stone foundation, but the roof was practically gone. The walls are still standing because I think they were something on the order of I want to say 20 some to 30 some inches thick.
That makes sense.
Your typical home now, I mean, we're what, 6-8 inches? Yeah. And plenty of these other shows that show that, and then just how to orient it on the land when you're in construction. But if you're in an existing home, there are still ways to take advantage of all that, right?
Absolutely. You can add insulation. You can upgrade your windows. You can improve your mechanical systems. Get Energy Star, very energy efficient, where they're going to operate much more efficiently and comfortably for you. So, and we see this passive house trend really taking shape in the U.S. tremendously. And it doesn't matter what the climate is. You can be in the middle of Vermont and, pretty extreme weather, and the passive house will still work as good as a house in Houston, Texas, or Miami, Florida. It just, there's adaptations to what you need to do depending on the location you're in. So it's pretty fascinating re-emergence of something we've done for thousands of years. Now we discovered it again.
And it doesn't have to take away from those softer attributes of the house that we think of, like the charm or the livability. It actually can enhance it, right?
Absolutely. A lot of the passive homes I studied and researched look like your traditional single-family home. You wouldn't even know that this is a passive home. It's like any other home in the neighborhood. And that's the key thing to think about. People sometimes mistake sustainability as this futuristic-looking modern thing. It could be, but it doesn't have to be. It's whatever your client would like to do. It's just the way you design it and the way you build it from the specifications that makes it a sustainable passive home.
Yeah, that's why I was curious when I said in Williamsport, like, do we have them? Because I suspected we may not know if they're out there, or
and there might be that I'm not aware of, but it's something that's picking up, and it's just breaking the old traditions of how we build and construct things, and it just takes a little bit of time for people to buy into it. But I'm seeing it more and more now, and this program is spearheading this process because the Habitat for Humanity house that we're going to be building here on campus, with the help of architecture students, construction students, is going to be a net zero home, which means it's a home that completely runs on renewable energy and it doesn't have a carbon footprint. So we're going to have an example in a couple of years that we can talk about.
That's so exciting. Yeah. I just was reading about that the other day.
Yeah, exactly.
Amazing. And you're involved in that? Your students are involved in that? The department,
our students, the design that was selected was designed by a fourth year senior student right now that designed it last year, Sadie Nedermeyer, I think. So it's just exciting.
Oh,
really
that's
exciting.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So Sandra, you're in at a really good time because you have 3 years left in your, or I forget which year you are.
I'm actually a senior.
You're a senior.
Yeah. I am a non-traditional student, so I do have just a couple more semesters after. But really, this will be my last year for all of my architectural classes, and then I have some gen eds to take care of.
But you'll at least be able to participate on the ground floor of this project.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So I have to ask, Sandra, how you found architecture. I know this isn't, it's not on our docket. I'm just curious how, and we heard Dr. Jabbour say he had that aha moment and that just pull to the profession. How did you come into it?
Well, I've always loved architecture. I grew up in Long Island, so I would, like Dr. Jabbour, just kind of walk around the city and just appreciate all the different buildings. And so I raised my family, and when it was my opportunity to go back to work, I thought, well, I could either go get a job or I could pursue my lifelong passion. And so I opted to pursue my lifelong passion.
Oh, that's great.
It's
Good
amazing.
For you.
Yeah. That's awesome.
So how's sustainability and that aspect play into it for you? Was that a deciding factor that's a key part of the program here at Penn College?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the hands-on, we did that project last semester with Sadie, and I was in her classroom.
Yes.
Yeah, I didn't do it with her. I did a separate project, but our whole class did it, and I really appreciate sustainability more now than I did when I started here. I mean, it's a great program, and hands-on, you can't compare it to anything else that's out there.
So if we think about someone who might be listening and thinking, you know what, I get that. This all sounds really interesting. Are there certain skills or anything you might want to tell them about being an architect and what that's like?
Well, you got to be resilient.
Okay.
You got to be very patient, and you got to have thick skin, because everything's going to seem and sound personal.
Okay.
When you're presenting a project, you labored for 8 or 10 weeks, and then you have a guest critic just completely shutting you down. It's just the nature of what we do. It's very kind of objective. It's like looking at a piece of art in a museum, and you might like cubism. You might think it's just, what is this? But that's how it is. Besides the functionality and all the requirements, at the end, you're looking at a creation of art embodied in a building structure. And some people like it, some people don't care about it. Your job is to make it meaningful enough for them to at least buy into the story that you're trying to sell. Because that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to tell a story. We're writing a book. And the book should be one that you can keep somebody interested in flipping the pages. And I tell my students, and you'll hear that next semester again. I tell them, if you're trying to create a building and you create a design solution, make me love it or make me hate it. If I have no triggered feelings about it, you have not done your job. If I'm feeling completely, unmoved or, just vanilla, like, okay, whatever. It's not sending the message. So good architecture triggers emotions, good, bad. It makes you laugh, it makes you sing, it makes you cry, it makes you hate something, makes you love something. As long as it's doing that, that's successful architecture, in my opinion. When it doesn't do any of that, then it is not architecture that is meaningful. You walk into a Kmart or a Walmart, you walk, you do your thing, and you leave. But there's no triggers, there's no emotions, there's no memories. Good architecture does that. And it did that for me when I was trying to discover my path.
Mm-hmm.
So I try to instill that in my students and tell them, just feel something when you walk into a space. Whatever that feeling, it doesn't matter. It could be hate, it could be love, it could be, wanting to sing and jump, whatever it is. Otherwise, it's go back to the drawing board.
What are the buildings that do that for you? And I address this to both of you.
Sandra, go ahead.
I mean, one building that sticks out in my mind is Jacob Javits Center. I mean, it's all glass and it's just giant. When you walk around there, you're just about that big. You can feel that mass and that space. That building really stands out in my mind.
Yeah, in my case, it's the Sagrada Familia, the Church of the Sacred Family by Antonio Gaudi in Barcelona. And I'm not a massively religious individual. I'm very spiritual. When you walk into this church, this beautiful basilica, the awe, grandeur of the space, the way the light filters through the stained glass and reflects on the floor, and how you as a person feel in that moment, you cannot not appreciate what you're seeing and what you're occupying. It's not just a structure. You feel the aura, you feel the space, you feel Gaudi's thoughts and struggles and tribulations all in one place. It's just an incredible feeling. And that's the feeling that most of my students got when we visited the Basilica last 2 years ago. They were at awe. They were for one moment on the trip. Nobody had their phones. Everybody was just looking. So for one moment, the only moment I saw on that trip, they saw without the screen in front of them. They truly saw. They truly observed. And I was so happy to see that. That's such a gratifying feeling, is that for once, they're seeing them through the lens of their eyes, not an object in front of them. And that told me a lot.
Buildings like that those are buildings that were not like your home, that are like the big box store or even a commercial building, which is built in a matter of months to maybe a few years. This is a building that took
decades and it's still under construction. And it's really, it's a labor of love for the entire citizens of Barcelona, because so it doesn't matter if you're 9 years old, 90 or 9 years old, you've seen this structure under construction for the last 50 plus years, if not more, and it's part of the landscape. I mean, it's what Barcelona is all about. And it's an incredible building. If you've never been to Spain, you've never been to Barcelona, and you have one building to see before you move on to better and bigger things, this building should be the one you see. It's so impressive.
What I find fascinating about that building too, and again, buildings of this stature, that yes, you have the architect, but because that construction is going decades, or even in some cases,
Centuries.
hundreds or more, that yes, the architecture vision is there, but it's the masons, it's everyone.
People. Yeah, you see the evolution and the change in materials and the way technology and advancements in construction techniques, and it's incredible. You're seeing a live, in person, real life simulation of a building adjusting through time. The vision is there, but the application might be different. So we're lucky to have it, and it's still going.
So I like that you brought up travel. Have you always traveled? I'm sure that's a big part of the architect that you are.
Yeah, I did the study abroad components when I was in school, in undergrad and grad, and it's just, to me, it goes hand in hand in becoming a more empathetic citizen and a more global human, where you're out of your shell. You're looking at things in a much more culturally sensitive way. So beyond just architecture and history and art, it's really the human nature that drives me to travel and explore different cultures.
And you take students on global experience courses.
We've been doing that since 2014, every year, and it's been growing and growing every year. And we're always facing the struggle of how can we get more students and accommodate them, because we don't want to turn anyone away, because we want to make this trip accessible and equitable and affordable to everyone that would like to participate. So it's a good problem to have, figuring out, well, how many trips can we do and how many courses can we teach to accommodate everyone. But this year we have an amazing set of destinations lined up, and this coming week we'll find out exactly what the numbers are. We're excited. I'm hopeful.
Are you going back to Europe?
We're going back to Europe. Europe is my playground. I'm just biased toward Europe. There's so much history, culture, and just, art. And it's also a connection to me with back home. Mm-hmm. It's the closest I can get to back home and feel like I'm in Lebanon without being in Lebanon. So to me, there's a personal connection that reminds me of back home. And this year, we're going to Prague, Vienna, Budapest. We're going to Milano, Lake Como, Verona, Venice. So it's an exciting 13-day journey that the students will immerse themselves in all these cultures.
And is this only architecture students?
It's open to every major on campus, and I make it an effort, part of my expanding how many students I can get. I make it a point to make sure that there's a diverse population, not just in terms of majors, but also in terms of ethnicity, religion, ideologies, thoughts. Because I want to have truly a reflection of the world we live in on my trip, and I try my best to do that. And it's usually 30 to 40% non-architecture students. So it's very exciting, and it's been, again, like I said, it's picking up every year, and we're excited to see what this year holds for us.
You mentioned access to that opportunity, and
yes.
Many students maybe not feeling that they could afford to do
Correct.
something like that. That there is assistance to a degree for some of that, right?
Absolutely. There's scholarships and some funding that the college and Lonnie's Klein's office provides from generous donors, past alumni. So we're grateful for that. And one of the reasons we always make sure that we have a large cohort going on the trip is to bring the cost down, because there's power in numbers. The more students sign up, the cheaper the cost for the entire cohort. So it's a two-way approach that we try to kind of handle that.
If there are other donors that want to be able to help out some of those students, we'll provide a link in our show notes back to that.
Absolutely. It's life-changing, and it will be very much appreciated.
So if I remember correctly, you've done some research. We're kind of flipping back to sustainable design a little bit, but can you tell us about your research? I'd love to learn more about that.
Yeah, most of my graduate level research was focusing on sustainable housing. And with my doctorate, I tied in affordable, sustainable housing, because sustainable housing is great, but if you're pricing out a large sector of the population, then what's the point? Again, we start dealing with the issues of energy equity and energy poverty, and it is the massive demographic sectors that suffer from that. So my focus was on delivering sustainable, affordable housing, and I targeted a lot of my research either in PA or in Lebanon, and these are the places I call home. And it was really just exciting to see the people reception of the ideas after we developed them.
So it seems like two completely different environments. How did that work?
Yeah,
what were the findings related to the two locations?
So, for instance, in PA, you see there's a little bit tougher buy-in when you talk about sustainable housing, a different way of living. People are just entrenched in their old ways and traditional behaviors, and they don't see the urgency of moving into a more sustainable world. Where in Lebanon, it's a matter of life and death. It's a matter of, do I have food on my table for the next day? So sustainability is not just about saving the planet and leaving it in a better place for our children. It's about sustaining your livelihood day in, day out. So there was massive buy-in when I was doing my surveying, and I can actually see that energy poverty and energy equity was a huge component in why people were leaning towards sustainable solutions. And it was truly kind of a bottom-up approach. When the US, it tends to be a top to bottom, guidelines by the government or the state that mandates certain things. In Lebanon, it's really a bottom-up movement, which is much more effective in any approach you're trying to achieve. So that was a huge finding.
So with your PA surveys, what were some of the concerns that were they open-ended questions, or do you have a sense of the
cost, the labor available to do the work, the skills needed to be able to build passive homes or net zero energy homes? And some instances, it went completely ideological and political. Like, why do we need to do stable housing? There's nothing is wrong. We can live the way we can live and everything's going to be okay. Where in Lebanon, there isn't that. Everybody recognizes the urgency and the problems we have, both that affects them economically and environmentally, and they were all in. So that was incredible to learn.
Was there any takeaways that you applied directly to your practice as an architect?
Yeah, I think one of the major findings is that, like I said, leaning on more passive, natural approaches, because that will bring the cost down for the client, and that will create more buy-in versus automatically rely on mechanical, active, expensive ways. And that was something the Lebanese people are doing now, because they recognize we have so much sun in Lebanon. Let's use sunlight to power our houses and heat them. And it's just like this amazing green revolution happening from the ground all the way to the top without any government mandates or help. So it's an incredible thing that I hope to start bringing more into the US.
Mm-hmm. Is your business primarily in Lebanon right now?
Most of my commissions and work are in Lebanon, but I've done some work in the US also, like beach house additions, renovations, residential scale here and there. But my practice, full blown, single family homes, sustainable projects is in Lebanon.
Do you see a movement within the U.S., within even like a portion of architecture firms that are moving in this way, or parts of architecture houses?
Absolutely. I think we have seen it massively now shifting in education, and we're seeing that also spill into the commercial practice, where a lot of companies are now creating divisions within their companies, researching sustainable approaches. And clients are slowly but surely now demanding, solutions that are sustainable to themselves and their clients. So definitely, I think compared to 10 or 20 years ago, we're in a much better place. We're not there yet. We're nowhere near what Europe is doing or the Middle East is doing. And I think we have lots of way to go, but definitely, I see the progress day in, day out. So I'm very helpful. And programs like ours are really a huge step in that direction. So that's what I think we have here, something really special.
Yeah, and it takes time, like you said. So it's not, you have people like Sandra going out into the workforce and you're going to be ready to make a difference. And I'm sure there are classes before her and there will be more after her with that same motivation.
It is, absolutely. And the toughest thing is, we're not talking about sustainability is tough to achieve. We can. It's behavioral changes that take time. For me to change your behavior, that takes time. And I cannot force you to change it. You're not in Europe or the Middle East where they force them. You have to design net zero energy homes. That's the law. The US, thank God, doesn't work like this. And I'm grateful for that. But it takes more time to change your lifestyle and behavior and get buy-in. And slowly but surely, programs like this, students like Sandra are spreading the message.
So what is your vision in a perfect world? What are you thinking? Like, let's say 20 years. What does that look like?
We don't even talk about sustainable architecture anymore. It is architecture that is sustainable. So we don't have, and that's because right now you call it, hey, this is a sustainable building. We have a sustainable architecture program. Oh, it's all architecture. It's all buildings. And they happen to all be sustainable because that's the standard. It's not an extra thing you have to do or convince a client to do. It is what is expected. It's code. You have to design buildings that are ADA, accessible, compatible, and compliant. Well, sustainability should be just that. It's just everybody expects, and then you can go over if you would like.
And really, at the end of the day, it's because it is just the better choice. It's not necessarily because it's a mandate. It's that if I want to build a building, I want it to be comfortable.
Exactly.
I want it to feel like, if it's a home, I want it to feel like home.
Exactly.
And if I can do that without having to, rely on a whole lot of infrastructure, gosh, why not do that?
And save money. And save money on utilities where you can potentially end up paying zero utilities monthly. Imagine that.
Yeah, and that's where it's surprising that homeowners and individuals in Pennsylvania, that speaks to people here, I think.
And that's why I try to sell
they
it.
Can say, yeah.
It's kind of this long-term investment, but then you have this short-sighted thinking where you think, it's going to cost me a little bit more than a traditional home. But what is little more when you're talking about 30, 40, 50 years living in a home, paying zero utilities per month? You're going to make everything you invested times 10.
And the value
of the home, the real estate, the property, the comfort. That's really important. Are you comfortable in the home you're living in? Do you feel healthy? Mm-hmm. That's important.
The comfort and the way it feels, but also how do you feel about living in a home that's the right home for,
Absolutely.
There's that too.
Exactly.
So Sandra, you've got a tall order here because you are part of that next 20 years of getting us to Naeem's vision. Where do you see yourself starting once you graduate from Penn College?
I have some local companies that I will be applying to, and I also plan to go for my master's graduate degree.
Brilliant.
Passive house is really the way to go. I mean, like Professor Jabbour said, it's a little bit more upfront, but the savings just within 5 years, 7 years is incredible.
ROI, the ROI is just common sense.
That seems like a very short time period. I mean, most people when they buy a home, they're in there for 5 to 7 years.
Oh yeah,
yeah, and the ROI is within that, and the front investment is not. I mean, you're talking maybe 5% over what a traditional price of a home is. But again, it's just being able to sell that story and convincing them why it matters.
So do most people that you work with come to you already with that idea that I want this to be a passive building, I want this to be a sustainable building, or do you have the opposite where you're trying? Okay.
Both. The people that come in with the idea that I want this to be a passive home, it's awesome. And they do that. More than often, we deal with clients, both in my former practice in Houston, Texas, and now in my kind of private practice, that you need to educate them. Not that they don't want to do it. You just need to educate them. What is it? What does passive house mean? What does net zero energy mean? And explain the front end investment and the ROI. And then this is going to be just, common sense. Mm-hmm. You're going to make it times 10 and 20 and 30. And there's a lot of programs and incentives, state and federal, that also help. So you're not on your own. The government is trying to do a lot here. It's just sometimes it's tough to get that buy-in. And education is huge. And that's why this program at Penn College is tremendously important for many reasons.
How does the program at Penn College differ from other programs?
The sustainable focus of the program, it's unparalleled. Unless you go to grad school, most undergrad architecture programs, they might brush on sustainability just passing by. There's not really that focus and that hands-on application-wise with everything that we approach, that you're not going to see that. It's much more theoretical in other programs, where over here we're practicing and applying everything that we theoretically introduce to the students. So those are two things that I think are just distinguishably special to us.
Yeah, I know we walk into space, and there's always like it seems like a new space every time I go there. The amount of models that students are creating is just mind blowing.
Be ready for that, Sandra. You'll be doing that.
Yeah, can't wait.
So are we ready for your final takeaway? Is there something you want to leave our audience with?
Absolutely. And this is something that I truly believe, right? That if you're interested in predicting the future, create it. That's what architects do. We predict the future by creating the future. And that is such an amazing feeling and responsibility, because we want to do it right. And having the chance to shape the world we live in and affect people's lives in a meaningful way, not many disciplines can do that. And we hope to do it for the best, because we don't always do it for the best. And that's what I tell everybody. Just give a damn about everything that you do, create meaningful experiences. And very importantly, architecture is not just buildings. Architecture is psychology, it's emotions, it's the environments you create, it's the journeys that you take, not just the final product. And Sandra and the students will discover that next semester, that the process of creating architecture is many times, in my opinion, more important than the end product that you create. So design like you give a damn.
Words to live by.
Yeah.
And I want to audit that course.
I was thinking the same thing.
It's so much fun. We'll have a lot of fun next semester. Yeah.
What are the prereqs?
We can talk about that. We can waive them.
Okay. All right.
Awesome. We're in.
All right.
Awesome.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you guys.
Yes.
Thank you for
Sandra.
having us. Thank you.
Thanks for hanging out with us today.
Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen to your podcasts.
Check out our show notes for bookmarks to your favorite sections and links to resources that we mentioned in today's episode.
You can also find past episodes and see what's on deck for upcoming ones at pct.edu/podcast.
And of course, we are open to your thoughts, ideas, and suggestions, so send those over at podcast@pct.edu.
It's been real.
Catch you next time.